Hello, hello. Okay, working. Great. Yeah, thank you. I think we'll close the door and yeah. So we're about 15 minutes late. So I guess we try to compress this into 1 hour. You know, as you know, we are at the second UN Ocean Conference, right, which is about how we can speed up our collective efforts to achieve the SDG 14. And we all know that the SDG 14 is critically important for humanity, right? For planet, and for biodiversity, and so forth. But of course, you know, SDG 14 is also connected to many other, you know, SDGs, right? And the materialization of which require financing, right? Which is what, you know, this session is going to focus on. And so today we're very happy to have a really very experienced panel who have worked in financing, you know, for not only you know the financing issue as such, but really has a focus on environment, on you know, blue financing, on green financing. So we have panelists who have brought a lot of experience in this. I will ask them to introduce themselves shortly. But to start with, we know that the development in relation to ocean, especially in small island developing states, require a lot of financing. But according to the that, you know, sustainability analysis that's conducted recently by the IMF, you know, they assessed the 20, you know, SIDS, 15 out of which are already in debt stress or facing serious risk of, you know, debt stress, while 4 others are in moderate stages of, you know, debt stress. It just shows that the needs, you know, are significant, but the ability to raise funding, you know, is constrained. And at the same time, you know, while the debts, you know, are increasing, the risks associated with climate, with their immediate environment in which they live, the biodiversity they rely on, and so forth, these risks are also increasing, right? So, so what can we do, right? As we're dealing with these kind of issues, but we also see the phenomenon increase in, you know, in blue bonds issuance. For example, in so-called the GSSI, right, the governance sustainability linked bonds, you know, issuance have also increased. I understand that in 2018, such, you know, bonds, you know, from both private and public issuance, you know, is about $200 billion. But by 2021, you know, these, you know, bonds, you know, have increased to $1 trillion, right? So there's a tremendous interest in this, but how much of this really also, you know, are going to the countries that really need them, right? And I think this is the kind of questions that we want to explore a little bit today. And so I have really a very prominent, you know, panelist, very experienced in the field. So I will, in fact, ask them to introduce themselves. Then I will maybe ask them a set of questions. Okay. So let me maybe start, you know, from the other end of this. You know, Marcos. You know, please, maybe Ms. Marcos Muller. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah. So I'm responsible for the thematic research of Deutsche Private Bank. So I'm heading the Chief Investment Office of Deutsche Bank Private Bank. I'm by background economist and sinologist, so I studied Chinese. So therefore it's a real pleasure to be with you on the same panel, Hao-Liang. And we've started to think about secular shifts in our socio-economic world a couple of years ago. And one of these big shifts it's not a trend, it's a shift. So something which will change the world we are living in is really the question of ESG, sustainability. And as the topic of climate has landed already in our society, and I do not say that it's solved, right? It has landed in the discussion of society, which is a prerequisite for solving a problem. We have been focusing then deliberately at Deutsche Bank on biodiversity and in this field on oceans, and this is underpinned by our belief in nature as capital. So natural accounting, I will talk about this a little bit later. Further on, I'm a lecturer for corporate finance at different universities, and my in general focus from my academic studies is the transformation of societies. I'm from Germany, so therefore forgive me if I'm sometimes too negative, but I will give a reason for this.
Hello, my name is Imen Moussa. I'm a director at Credit Suisse. I work in structured credit. And I was privileged because I was part of the team who structured the Belize Blue Bond, so hence I'm here. Definitely Credit Suisse is really engaged on the ocean side. For us it's really important. We know how important it is as well for climate and heat, etc., in addition to biodiversity. So we're very engaged into that. By background, I'm engineer with master in statistics, and I'm from Tunisia.
Hello everyone, and thank you for the invite today. I'm Alberto Casorati. I work for the European Investment Bank, and I'm an investment officer focused on impact finance for the green transition, which of course includes the blue economy. As you can imagine, the European Investment Bank is really focused on climate, and the blue economy is really an important part of such a strategy. And yeah, I'm Italian, and my background is in finance, so I studied finance. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so I just a couple of words about myself. I guess I'm Hao Liangshu. I'm heading UNDP's Bureau for Policy and Program Support. For UNDP, we are working in 170 countries and territories, and really to support them with a goal to support them to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the areas where we're working on is try to, and I would say, both leverage financing for the development objectives of these countries, but also to really help align the resources that are in both private and the public sectors, so that these investments are, supportive of the SDGs, right? So both to leverage and to align investments, because we know that public sector funding alone, right, will not be enough to achieve the Agenda 2030, right? So we need all investments in public and private sector to be aligned to the goals of the sustainable development. So in this context, we're really happy that we have this panel. And one of the questions we try to get out of this panel is really to have a better understanding of what the banks are already doing, right, to move into the direction of not only pursue a business, right, to seek a sustainable business from the financial point of view, but really also doing good in the process, right, to ensure that their investments produce social and environmental benefits, ensure these benefits so that we have a sustainable future, right? So I have two blocks of questions. One is, generally what your institutions are doing, right, in this regard. What products you have to support, the sustainable development. And the second block of questions, I would probably focus a bit more on the question of bonds, which have a lot of interest. But I know that, Alberto, for example, you work in private, private banking, equity side a bit more. But I think it is also going to be very interesting for our audience to know not only the instruments that target public sector, right? But also I'm sure that a lot of SIDS countries, our audience are very interested in what options are there to really drive investment in the private equity area, the impact investing and so forth. So if I may, I will start with you, Marcos. I have a question for you. Okay. So as a Deutsche Bank, the blue economy offer, is part of the thematics of the private bank. I understand, right? So your view seems that everyone is committing to climate topics, but the biggest worry on biodiversity and ocean is not receiving enough attention, right? So what solutions can you offer, that not enough attention is paid to these kind of important areas? Yeah.
So an American author with German background said once, there is to each complex problem an answer which is simple, transparent and wrong. And I think I do not want to say that we need to do complex solutions, but I rather want to say with this that we have to appreciate and to acknowledge the complexity of the world we are living in, to find for the various problems we have around us solutions. So this is the prerequisite for the understanding. What does it mean? It means that the planetary boundaries in general and the topics we discuss, ocean depletion, etc., are symptoms of something which I would call a market failure. And the market failure is that we do not value nature in our economic decisions. Because of not doing this, we do ignore nature in our economic policy decisions or in our economic decisions. This is not done deliberately because we are all mean. It's rather we have not done it. And this goes back to the question of what is value, what is price, what is stock, what is flow. And we are currently not assessing the stocks, natural stocks, the world we are living in, our habitat. So we are not excluded out of nature, we are embedded in nature. And we do not value it, and therefore we do not consider it in our measurements. We just measure the flow via GDP. This is not wrong, but the GDP is not the right measurement for understanding the value of nature and keeping the ecosystem services we are all dependent on intact. So therefore, this is our predominant first answer. We need to find an answer to this before we can solve the other problems. But the time is running against us. So I would be very optimistic if we would not have this time pressure, because we are reaching tipping points. When it's broken, it's broken. It's very binary. So I think we need now to embrace the ambiguity of doing already adaptation. So we have to acknowledge that there is something broken, and we have to adapt to the new reality while exchanging the old economic model with a new economic model which takes exactly nature as capital into account, and we need to protect it. And we know this from marine protected areas, for instance, that they really can deliver more economic output if we have the right size, the right measurement of protection in place. And this is an example that this doesn't mean at the end that we all will suffer economically. And secondly, I think as nature happens locally and as biodiversity is especially distributed in countries which do have problems with social security networks, etc., it can be one of the biggest inclusion programs of the world. But we have to consider that it is not about us in Europe, it is not about us in the US, it is about the global South in relation to us. Because at the end, and this is just a hint to the further discussion, we need nature for debt swaps, we need blue bonds. But the problem is that 2/3 of our global companies, be it listed or non-listed companies, have an impact on the oceans. We won't solve the issue with blue bonds. We won't solve the issue with debt for nature swaps. We need them to redirect, to channel investments, but we need to go in the value chain of the companies. And this is something what I would really put at center stage of our discussion. And then we will find the projects we will finance, because those projects are then the projects which will substitute the old economy, which we won't use anymore then if we have understood the underlying problem. So a long answer to a complex question.
We have to do this really, hand over a little bit here. But thank you very much, Marcos, for setting the stage, really. I think you didn't answer my questions, but you set the stage perfectly, okay. But I think, you know, I think you really pointed out a key issue, right? That is, you know, simple financial solutions is not enough. You need the whole society to change the perspective and the outlook, right, for how we run our economy in a way. Right? So thank you very much for this. So let me ask, you know, Imene, okay, so, you know, I know you have worked on the blue economy, right, for some time. And also, you know, so you have done, as you mentioned, you know, some work on Belize, right, the debt swap issue. So you're very experienced in this. So can you, you know, talk us through, you know, some of these transactions, you know, products that Credit Suisse has worked on, and so what are, you know, some of the examples that you think, you know, can bring us, you know, close to the goals we want to achieve, the driving sustainability and helping achieving sustainable development, while also really helping the developing countries to create the kind of fiscal space that they need, right, to support, you know, their development goals. Yeah, thank you.
Hello. So I will kind of start with a product that we developed, and actually that joined the idea that Marcos was mentioning. So we have developed, for example, the Ocean Engagement Fund, which is investing, which is a fund with that we worked with Rockefeller Asset Management, and it's mainly about investing in companies in our countries that are actually active in the ocean. And we're very engaged with these companies, so they kind of help protect the ocean. So this is kind of an example of just a product that we're selling to our investor, and which is more on the north side of the world. But ultimately, for me, in the context of SIDS, the Belize transaction makes a lot of sense because ultimately Belize is going through similar issues that other SIDS go through. So in 2020, with COVID, ultimately Belize was going through a rough time. There were like less people going there for holidays, so the tourism impact was quite big. There were like 16.7% reduction in shrinkage in the economy. But also debt to GDP went to 133%. So Belize was looking for a way to refinance, and they had this huge debt of 533 million in hard currency. So it was called super bond, and it was issued in 2007, and it was already restructured 3 times. So they were again in discussion with their bondholder to see what they can do. But at the same time, Belize was really engaged because I think all SIDS realized that, and I have been on other panels with regard to SIDS, and everybody knows that yeah, ocean is the reason all these kind of island and the people who live in the ocean is a real resource, either like fishing, tourism, nature, everything is really important, is coming from the ocean. So ultimately, Belize was already very engaged in terms of conservation, and they have been talking at the time to the Nature Conservancy about what they could do. And the Nature Conservancy thought that they worked on the Seychelles blue bond a few years ago, so in 2016, which was also a debt swap, but smaller, and also involving a bilateral loan, which was like kind of easier to kind of restructure. So in this case, for Belize, they were able to kind of reduce their debt. So in terms of debt saving, they saved like 200 million, both in principal and interest. And then they were also able to get 180 million savings over the 20 years to invest in conservation. And the transaction was done and was contingent on commitments from Belize towards the ocean. So other than the funds that are going to be spent on conservation and projects, the idea was that ultimately Belize was kind of, as I mentioned, keen to progress on the ocean conservation. TNC definitely, and many countries are looking at the 30 by 30 engagement, so protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. So ultimately, Belize, to get this debt relief, was committed to increase the biodiversity protection zone from 15.9% to 30% by 2026, and also finalize a marine spatial protection planning, by 2026. These are like two of the lists of commitments that you can find on the TNC website that Belize was happy to engage in, so they can get the debt relief. So ultimately, it was, people love the kind of this product because there are 2 points to it. There is the debt sustainability, so it's definitely helping Belize to actually, they decreased their debt to GDP by 12 points, thanks to the transaction, but also to create the kind of conservation that they are on their side in terms of commitments, but also in terms of funding. And the funding goes, first of all, to Conservation Trust Fund that is kind of spending like 4.2 million per annum, which is 3 times what Belize spent today, like before the transaction, on conservation and ocean, but also have in 20 years an endowment of 92 million, and they can continue to spend this money even for conservation, even after the whole transaction is done. And ultimately for Belize as well, it was the opportunity to kind of get new capital from private investor who never envisaged to invest in Belize debt. So it was also the opportunity to diversify the pool of investors. Sorry, it was a long.
So thank you very much. It was long. I could not even stop you, right? But since I don't have a microphone, but it's very fascinating, right? It's a lot of details. I think the world really needs case studies. You know, I think successful case studies, or even failures. You know, of efforts. I think what you described is really fascinating, right? And what I'm getting from it is that. You know, there are different instruments, right? And some are more complex. I think what you described seems to be more complex than issuing a bond, you know, right? But in this case, you know, not only you know, solve the immediate financial pressure, you know, the government faced, but also it seems that you have helped to reduce the debt stock, right? Quite sizably. So I think it's really fascinating example. So we can talk more, okay? And so, Alberto, you know, you and your team work on a green transition, right? But I understand at EIB, your investment approach, you know, is a thematic impact financing, taking riskier projects linked to innovation, right, in the green transition. So and I understand the blue economy is one of the pillars, you know, that you are working on. So can you describe, you know, your investment, you know, approaches and structure and the products a little bit, you know? Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you for the question. I guess I bring a bit of a different perspectives compared to my colleagues here. I'm more focused on the private sector side. So in my everyday job, I'm focused on, as I said, thematic impact finance. And in particular, our focus is on the green transition. So my team is mainly providing venture debt product for innovative companies in the area of the green transition. This means 5 main areas. We cover the energy sector, the mobility sector, and then we cover also the circular economy, blue economy, bioeconomy, and the decarbonization of heavy industries. And the blue economy, of course, is a key part of our strategy in terms of investments. We have been in this area for a number of years, initially mainly related to the energy sector. So we have invested in new solutions which are ocean-based energy solutions, such as offshore wind energy, or we have also invested in wave energy solutions, which are very innovative and need to be proven at scale. Actually, both these projects are located outside the Portugal shores. And more recently, what we've been looking at is data from the ocean side as an enabler for the blue economy. If we're looking at developing really the blue economy, one of the missing element in the picture is the data, because oceans are really wide and difficult to explore, as we all know, given the harsh condition, and data is something very precious and difficult to collect. So, for example, in this area, recently we are looking at a company that is developing a new solution for collecting data in relation to different sectors, from fishery to wind, offshore wind, where instead of using standard vessels, which requires a crew and they are obviously more polluting, they are, for example, using uncrewed vessels. So they're basically working as drones on water. And so that's where what we are looking at, really at the edge of innovation, companies that are providing new solutions that can really help the transition that Marcos was talking about, not the old economy, but really the new and green economy.
So thank you very much, but I think this also sounds fascinating, because the SIDS economy, the blue economy, needs really investment in all areas. Right? UNDP has rising up for SIDS, so we call it SIDS offer, and that has 3 elements. One clearly is climate change, right? One is digitalization, right, to help the countries to move to digital, competency, and the other is the blue economy. I think what you're describing is definitely what SIDS needs as well. So thank you very much for this good example. So I have a lot of questions. I wanted to move to something more specifics. Okay, Marcos, you mentioned really a very important philosophy, right, in your investment approach. Okay, you mentioned the planetary boundaries, right, and the valuing ecosystem service, right? It's not just money flows, but how do you do it, right? So can you talk, a bit, specifically how you're helping investors using planetary boundaries, right, including nature, in accounting, to understand the value and the stock, right? Yeah.
And you're right, I didn't answer your first question directly because I forgot the following sentence, because how I described it, this is how we do it, or how we want to do it, because we need, and this is now the segue to the second question, and we will talk about this later. I think we've joined AURA, so the Ocean Risk Resilience and Action Alliance. Because of this collaboration with AURA, we've got the chance as a bank to understand the oceans. We are economists, and we should remain economists. We should not try to become biologists, because we would clearly fail. So we need a collaborative approach between those disciplines. And therefore, we can do all things we want to do because we know finance. Everyone here knows finance, but we have to do it right. We, of course, will learn out of failure, but at the end, we are also having a fiduciary duty. For the assets we manage on behalf of our clients with a dedicated objective. If either the objective is return or risk, or return and risk, and quality means impact / supporting a transition. Before we can fulfill our fiduciary duty, we need to know a lot of things. And I have to say, I'm hesitant sometimes to put too much enthusiastic products out where I'm not really sure of whether it will work. Because this can destroy the trust of investors in an emerging field. And therefore it's important that we have maybe a kind of collaborative approach, and we need governments. I agree that we have to increase a private part in it, but we also need the de-risking part of it. We need stable projects. We need transparency around this, and the transparency won't come from if everyone is doing this in silos. So what I'm always getting a little bit nervous about is everyone is talking on these panels about what they do. But what do we do together? Everyone is talking to each other, but I would like to make an assessment after such conferences, what kind of cooperative activities really have been then the outcome of those conferences. We need to go beyond pledges. And this is something where we also need to educate the clients. And then this is also what we are doing. So we've trained, for instance, all of our employees in the private bank about ESG and sustainability in the last year. Everyone got the training. And this is important because if our advisors are sitting in the client meeting and not feeling comfortable to answering the questions, they won't get there. Not because of they don't want, they do not feel comfortable. And we should not forget, we spent so many years at university to understand finance. How shall we learn oceans or ESG in general in 2 to 3 years? It will take time. But the ocean literacy, the environmental literacy is a prerequisite for feeling comfortable. But at the same time, this puts pressure again on us because this is a normal social development which won't be done in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years. So we have to do this in parallel. And then now in very short, we are talking about the bellwethers in our daily television senders about the stock exchange. But there is no ocean. There is no hint to the world we're living in. We are just talking about a tiny percent of the global companies which are listed. But the 95% of the companies which are the backbone of our societies, the small and mid-cap companies, no one is talking about them. We need to find solutions there. If the big companies change, this is great. This is a great use case. But how to leverage this in the 90%, 95% of our economy? This is a big question. And lastly, we need to find an answer to the Global South. What is your opportunity? If I speak to projects in the Global South, and I've did this now in London, not that London is in the Global South, but during a client meeting, and we currently, not we as a bank, we as a global village have not an answer to a family in parts of Africa or in Latin America how they can feed their family tomorrow if we change rapidly the local infrastructure of their country. We need to find answers for this. And this is a little bit the challenge where I'm puzzled because we are talking among us and this sounds great, but the challenges are really, really huge. So therefore these education and these cooperation, we need to think about financing projects which are maybe polycentric. Local staggered projects brought together and financed through one facility. Because we know it from our banks, and maybe you disagree or maybe you agree, some of the projects are too small for doing the due diligence, for really giving the money. And they are too intransparent. They are maybe very good, but we do not know it. And what is traded at stock exchanges? Expectation based on information. The better the information, the better the expectation, the higher the willingness of an investor to engage. And this is where we need all together to go in, and there we can just play a role together, but not alone.
I agree with you, Marcos.
No, thank you very much, Marcos. I think clearly you're speaking from your position as a managing director and the global head of the chief investment office, right? So you're looking at some systemic issues, right? So I think I appreciate that, and I think you also highlighted the importance of knowledge base, right? Not only of financing, but really other areas of sustainability, right? Because without understanding that, you cannot engage, productively with the kind of clientele, right? That are interested in these kind of issues, right? So thank you. And I think you also brought up a question that the changes in financing, right, is an issue not only for a number of big players. The challenge is to, in my language, is perhaps bring this kind of discussion to all boardroom, to the boardrooms of all companies. I mean, that's what needs to take place, right? Because otherwise, it's just not enough, right? To change what you are describing is the really different philosophy, of the economy. As you said, beyond, in the UN, we're also discussing beyond the GDP, right? Many countries are measuring their success based on their GDP or GDP per capita, but it is this kind of economic philosophy that has brought us to where we are today, right? On the brink of like biodiversity breakdown, and climate crisis and so forth. Right? So we really needed to only really agree with you and to do more, what you are describing as needed. So thank you very much. Okay. Now, from this more broad, perspective, I want to ask Imani a question more specifically, right? So I want to ask with you, okay, and how does the blue economy, right, this notion of blue economy, fit in with your climate or your investment themes, right? That the banks clients are looking for, right? Are they looking for products that really talk about the blue economy, or they just are looking for a return, right? So thank you.
So ultimately, the investors are looking for blue economy, and like we saw in the market. I'm talking about the debt market here, that there were a lot of demand at some point, especially in 2020-21. Now it's a bit kind of has faded a bit, but mainly because of all the greenwashing issues. So people are now kind of more try to understand better before they invest, which makes sense ultimately. So that's a good move ultimately, because it means that the next green or blue investment will have more impact than the one that maybe we've seen. So that's definitely very important. I think that the investors are also, for example, in the case of Belize, again, just to use as a concrete example, we've been selling, so Credit Suisse is the one who financed initially, but we sold the blue bonds to our investor, and it was oversubscribed. It went into mainly insurance company and pension funds in Europe, US, Americas, and Asia, especially Japan. So definitely is something that people are looking for. The other point that I found brave as well is people went into details, because ultimately it's not the typical transaction is not just a blue bond where the proceeds are used for a specific reason. So people were looking at it and we're kind of very, very happy about the impact. And it's mainly coming back to what Marcos was saying. It's mainly about partnership. I agree. I'm a finance person. I need someone, and same. I went through training. I had my little course, etc. But the main point is that we need also to rely on people who know what they are doing. So for us, the partnership with the Nature Conservancy, who has a long history of kind of conservation, and they have the right academics, they are knowledgeable in terms of marine spatial planning, which I'm not at all. So all these, and they have a science-based way to deal with that. So they are the experts and they know what they are doing. So for us, partnering with them and is important. And for our investors as well, having someone credible and knowing that it's not just a label, that someone is really going on the ground and doing what needs to be done and in the right way is very important. So that part was very, very for our investor base is important. I would say is the usual. Investors are also kind of wary about risk return. Ultimately, we're in a financial market, so it's they want to do good, but they also want the returns. I think that we have these three kind of pillars that are taken into account the impact, definitely, and making sure that it makes sense, but also the fact that it makes sense from a risk-return point of view. And in this transaction, we had also the PRI, so a credit enhancement on the product. So just for the product itself, the blue bond actually was rated AA2 by Moody's, whereas Belize at the time was rated CAA3. So ultimately, for the investor, having like that burden, knowing that actually they have a product that is insured by DFC, which has the full faith and credit of the US, is something that that helped investor get comfortable on the risk side and actually think, okay, like this is a perfect product from a risk return point of view, but also from an impact point of view. And I think that there is a lot of collaboration to be done, because I'm talking about credit enhancement from from a development from DFI, but ultimately there are other DFIs, but also credit enhancement can be done in other ways, where maybe someone, rather than giving grants, take the equity part of the debt. There are many ways to do this. It needs collaboration, but ultimately we're here for make sure that solutions are found. So that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, clearly there's an interest from your clients, right? But and there's also challenges, and one of these challenges that we've heard is the issue of credit rating, lack of credit rating in many developing countries, especially in SIDS. Okay, so I want to dwell on this a little bit more. Okay, so maybe about one question I have for you, since you're working on the private, side, private equity side more. How do you look at the question of credit rating, right? When it comes to investment in emerging economies, or not in EU27, right, which you are comfortable with, but outside EU27, right? How do you look at this question of credit rating?
Well, I mean, obviously most of our investments, when they are on the private side, so obviously they will not have a public rating in most of the cases. And of course, for an institution as the EIB, the European Investment Bank, we get comfortable with the assessment of this project through a very thorough due diligence, effectively. It doesn't matter if it's in the EU27 or if we are talking outside EU. The process is pretty much consistent across all the bank, and the way we carry out our due diligence is not just a financial due diligence. So we're not just looking at the business plan or the financial projection of the company or the expectation of the project. Is really going into the details. So we have a technical team inside the bank. We have engineers with sector expertise and economists, where they really help us to go into the details. So we'll be looking at all the aspects, not only the financial aspects, we will also look at the technology aspects. And of course, we will also want to make sure that all of our projects meet our policy requirements. So that there is the environmental assessment is in line with our policies, as well as the social impact of our investments.
Thank you very much. Clearly, what you described is what's important for private equity, right? But I would maybe ask Marcos and Emmanuel, right? But for issuance of blue bonds, right? And you do need to have a credit rating, right? Sovereign credit rating. But many countries, they really don't have, sometimes a small country don't have a rating, but even when it has a rating, the rating is not very strong, right? But the UN, okay, UNDP, for example, have done a lot of work that we believe, help de-risk investment, right? Because on a particular sectoral issues, of, let's say, climate change, if you want to develop, for example, renewable economy, you have to undertake reforms in policy areas. and to create incentives, for attracting investment and so forth, right? But also there are governance challenges in many settings, right? And many countries, including developed countries, have to deal with questions of transparency, corruption, money laundering, and so forth, right? So, so we know that we are not a financial institution as UN, right? But we know that a lot of work we do, help create a safer investment environment, right? And it would help improve credit ratings. So, in your view, should the UN do this kind of work, or is there a possibility that we should maybe work together to help our countries to improve their credit standing? Right? I think you touched on this a little bit, but I want to hear a bit more.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question, and to overcome such similar challenges, we are working with local DFIs also very closely together, because this helps us then to understand in our FIC activities the local necessities far better than if we just work with a cross-regional intermediaries. So this is I think very important, that we use more the set of capabilities which are local in the market where we finance projects. So this is one. How long you mentioned a very important part. This is de-risking. But de-risking just can be done with support of governments, very likely. So I know this from IUCN, very interesting, and I also think, and IUCN is a part of UN, so what IUCN can do, in my opinion, is really reviewing and approving nature-based solutions. This is one important part. It goes not in the direction of government rating, but it is already something which is a kind of due diligence process for a project, because we do not have the knowledge about nature-based solutions, but we know that we can't just transform the world with electrification, because we would need 500% of the commodities we are already using. This would be not sustainable. So we need nature-based solution to make the trick. And there, IUCN, a body of UN, can help. And then maybe we need to have the discussion you just have alluded to. As you see, I'm hovering around. I have no answer whether UN should take a lead here, but at least UN should take a lead of a discussion here to target this discussion clearly into this direction. But maybe you have an answer.
I think that there are like many stakeholders here, and I think that ultimately on the credit rating, I think that it's more. I would think that DFIs still have a role to play there. I think where UNDP can help is definitely more on the I would say environmental or nature or social side, because like ultimately TNC, the Nature Conservancy is for example present in Belize. I'm sure they are present elsewhere, and we're working with them on other projects. But definitely it's about like UNDP can help on two sides. Like first of all, like definitely helping maybe understand what type of even target makes sense for that country in terms of improving their, I would say, I'm not only blue but green or social. So first of all, understanding what should be their target, because we can't assess that. Like I don't know what is a significant target for a country, for example, like Tunisia, even if I'm from there. That's one. Second one is, I agree, making sure like it's mainly being there and being present, so knowing what projects make sense, who are social, civil society that's there, that is active, that are trying to achieve things, and maybe partner to see what type of projects make sense, etc. And then ultimately there is also the relationship with the government. We have definitely covering, we issue debt, either brown or other through countries. So we talk to the head of central banks, we talk to the Minister of Finance, but ultimately when it comes to projects like this, there will be other like parts of the government that are involved, like environment or you name it, or like social, etc. There are many like every time we worked on this type of transaction, you have other ministers which actually very different objectives that are involved. So having that relationship that makes, because like UNDP can work on these relationships or maybe are already present. I know that you are already present in certain countries. So that would be very helpful because it will help at least on the part that is having investor or private capital trusting the impact side is very important. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of question mark about governance or corruptions in these countries, unfortunately. And I think having something like, some UNDP being saying, oh, we're there, so we're making sure things are happening, is amazing. And same actually for impact reporting, because it's not only about putting the money there, but it's also afterwards making sure like money are delivered to the right projects, granted to the right projects, and then delivering the impact that they are supposed to deliver. So all that work, which is, I would say, a lot of work, will kind of be very helpful.
So maybe I have one more round of questions. Then maybe if there are questions from the audience, we can have some discussions. The question I have is really, we have seen the phenomenon growth of bond issuance, for example, right? But our developing countries, especially SIDS, still have not seen large amount of increase of this kind of financing flows to their countries. So I have two specific questions very quickly. One is that what do you think is holding back the large amount of financing flowing to these SIDS, right? The economies in the SIDS. How can your institutions, what does it take for your institutions to invest more, right, in this, in the economies of these countries, right? So this is one. Then the other question, very quickly linked to this, is so what do you think, the UN, can do, right? How can UN help, right, to work with you, perhaps, to increase the financing flow, to these, developing countries. Maybe I go this order, about.
Yeah, from my side, I mean, I guess what is probably true to say is that obviously in these countries is often difficult to find the right project to invest in. And I think what we have seen and what the bank has been doing over the years is to intervene a bit upfront, and even before a project is potentially ready for financing, is to work with the local authorities to get them ready and mature enough for them being either invested or financed by the bank itself. So we have a number of projects related to advisory services where we help the local government to shape in a way the projects so that then they can become more credible and more financeable. So for example, in the context of our Clean Ocean Initiative, we have a program dedicated to the Caribbean region to really where we put some money and some budget to develop projects with the local authorities and prepare them for a potential financing under the Clean Ocean Initiative.
So I think one issue identified very clearly is in a way pipeline, right? So you need a strong project pipeline. So I think maybe some comments a bit later. Thank you.
So just to comment about why SIDS aren't seeing like flow of money, and I'm going to just comment from a government debt point of view. It's mainly because of the risk ultimately. So some of the investors are fine to like when the government issue bonds to markets, they are like emerging market funds that would invest. It's very, very specific, and most of the people like don't feel comfortable to invest in these type of, because I think it's riskier than investing in a whatever US, for example, government debt, and so there is less investment because there is more risk. So the main point here is definitely, but the opportunity that SIDS have right now is the blue economy and people interested in blue economy. So I think that it will open, it's opening the door to getting more interest from investors. But ultimately, again, like you need that element of which would bring interest from investor, but you also need the part where you're credit enhancing. You can't do, if you want more investment, that's needed actually, because you open the door to other investors who usually don't look at the SIDS debt because it's too risky. What UN is like, as I mentioned earlier, for me the main role is what we can do is like mainly seeing what countries are interested in conservation commitment, because that's really important, and work from there. Like you can speak to us ultimately, so you have my business card now, but but you can speak to us and we can try to find other partners where we can all together bring a solution. And I think that's also, as mentioned by Marcos, I hope the reason that we have this conference as well. So it's mainly about finding so we are trying to build these relationships and making sure that all these parts to make the transaction happen or to make investor interested are here. So we can start on the conservation aspect, because for us is the first part, which that's where the story starts, because then we can get help from a DFI, etc. And I think that's the angle that SIDS have today, is starting with that angle and using it to get the credit enhancement and then get access to the capital market.
So I want to compare this with a current issue of the climate dialogue we have with our corporate clients. Because the taxonomy in Europe is imposing a dedicated disclosure requirement and structure requirement for climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And the bank can play a role of a positive agent of change in this context, because the bank has to ask the corporate, tell me your details. And if we now exchange the word corporate by SIDS or LDC, we know what we need. We need information. And we need, and I have seen this during the last quarters very often, that local authorities are shy to ask questions. The biggest failure is not asking the bank a question. Even a Ministry of Finance should be brave enough to ask us questions if they do not have really conviction in the trajectory of their project. So really have this transparent dialogue. This is so important. And thinking, unfortunately, fortunately, in a holistic way. In a holistic way that we need to know the social topics in the region. Child labor, diversity, gender equality. This is important also for financing ocean projects. And to disclose this is one of the first steps to being able to assess the underlying risk. Without being able to assessing the underlying risk, it will be very, very difficult. And this is, I think, a role the UN can play to make this transparent in a fair and not diminishing dialogue process, because then banks can start to understand what they can do. And lastly, I think it is also important that, and I have hinted it already, that we give a perspective to the countries. We have to link the economic performance to biological biodiversity progress. Just to use again the marine protected area example with the inverted U shape. So on the x-axis you have the protection, and on the y-axis you have the outcome. If you protect everything, no outcome. If you protect nothing, no outcome because you destroy it. So the truth lays in the middle. But with such a concept, we can convince the local communities, the people, A, that they have to play a role because we need their knowledge. Secondly, there is outcome for you, and the outcome is better than before. And we have a very great example. Fortunately, unfortunately, in the developed part in New York. It's Shinnecock Bay. It's a hope spot. They have revamped via nature-based solution the complete bay that the local community can now live from harvesting clams again. And this is so breathtaking because this shows that we do not have to make a compromise on our occupation, on our employment, on our economic activity when we do this right. But this is just something what we can do in a way to reduce asymmetric information, sorry, I'm an economist, to then facilitate the money towards those projects. Last but not least, IUCN can provide us a list of projects they want to have financed. And they are already on it. And this is really great, but we need those.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think our time is almost up. But all what you have said really, provides many practical, steps, for us to collaborate. I think about you mentioned the question of, pipeline, for example. We have actually a lot of work that can generate pipeline. We have hundreds of projects that are really successful, but our challenge is how can they be brought to scale, right? Because we have a lot of pilot projects with a sizable investment that are successful, but how can we, really attract, make them bankable? I think that's our challenge, right? But we have a basis, we have a lot of basis. We have, for example, climate investment platform on climate. We have ocean innovation challenges that are producing pipelines essentially. Okay, and we have now, yesterday, right, we had the coral global fund for coral reefs, right, which is also producing pipelines. So we can do a lot together. I think in terms of information, I think the UN is really good at analysis. So we do a lot of socioeconomic analysis, right? We have very good general equilibrium calculations. The economists do, but we also have a lot of micro level analysis to look at the impact of the shocks, for example, on different segments of population, so that we can help direct the policy interventions, perhaps also investment actions. We can definitely do this. Under our SDG Impact project, we have not only produced the investment guide, standards, impact standards for equity, for bonds, for private enterprises. Right? We have developed these standards in consultation with the industry. We have also created a so-called SDG investor maps, right? In now 20 countries. We're going to go to 30 countries by end of this year. These are, so-called sectoral, essentially information linked, the SDG linked sectors, okay, where you will see the size of the market. You will see enough analysis that will get the investors to a stage where they can, okay, I will decide now to perhaps invest in feasibility studies. So we have information in these sectors, SDG linked sectors, to a level that I think we believe is detailed enough for an investor, potential investor, to look at this seriously. And we have a number of examples where some intermediaries have started to invest in feasibility studies to create the pipeline for investors. So definitely, I think there's a lot of potential for collaboration. So we started a bit later. I don't know if there's one or two questions from the audience, then maybe we can close. Okay, so I think the ladies first, and if you can introduce yourself briefly. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Hazel. I'm from Guatemala, and I come from a small NGO. We do ocean literacy, And we work a lot of youth and children empowerment in our coastal communities. And I work a lot to push them to keep studying and hopefully in the future study in the university and follow a career that focuses on ocean sustainability. And I'm a scientist, so I push a lot for them to be scientists, especially for the girls. But now after this panel, it was just really inspiring, and now I will push them to be economists as well. And well, I just wanted to, I just wanted to ask you, like, what would you like to tell them? Like, I could share when I get back to Guatemala. What would you tell them for the youth and the children from coastal communities from a country so underdeveloped like Guatemala? How can they be part of blue economy?
Simon Young from WTW. I actually wanted to add something quickly on the Belize deal, and I'd really emphasize to anybody in the room and spread the word that the details of the Belize deal are incredible. My actual question is why haven't there been a number of successes? Because one of the points that I think is the most important is that S&P's credit rating of Belize's sovereign debt went up 3 notches after that deal closed. That for the bigger investment environment is incredibly important because the sovereign rating in those countries is a cap on the rating of pretty much any other debt. So I think that's really important to emphasize, that if you can work on the sovereign side, then that really unlocks the playing field for the non-sovereign debt. But I'd also like to mention that we put in place a parametric hurricane wrapper for the debt repayments, in addition to the political risk insurance. And for a country like Belize, where climate risk is real and ever present and has a big impact on GDP when those events happen, that's an important additional element, because your PRI does not cover all of the risk. And pre-COVID, the big hits to Belize's GDP had all been because of hurricanes. So it's really important to take that into account as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just on the last point on insurance, definitely, because this is an important way to spread the risk, right? So that the cost of recovery is not borne only by those who are affected. So that you have so we have in fact a big undertaking to develop the insurance market in many developing countries. Working with IDF and so forth. So. Thank you very much. So I guess these are interesting and important comments. So let me say this. Okay, maybe let's end. Since the important question is asked by the lady from Guatemala. Maybe I end up in the last word. I'll give to you, Imene. But so maybe Alberto and Marcos and Imene, you can maybe answer these questions quickly.
Yes, sure. Well, congratulations for what you're doing. I think is really impressive, and I guess you probably can be more inspiration to the young lady and young guys in Guatemala than me. But I mean, I think honestly, yeah, what you're doing is really amazing, and I mean, from my side, I think the inspiration really comes from showing what can be achieved. So really showing what a career in any area can do for them in terms of not only economic one, but also in terms of the impact that your career can have outside your personal achievement.
So 2 things from my side. First is stay curious. I think the most important driver for development was curiosity. If we do lose our curiosity, we never will change, because we will get stuck in complacency or even more difficult situations. So really create the desire for understanding, for changing. And then this counts, by the way, also for all of us. Stay curious. And then the second one is, which also counts for all of us, is asking us constantly the question, what should we have done in 2022 in Lisbon? out of the perspective of 2030, out of the perspective of 2050. If we now try to build a trajectory from today to the next years, we already have incorporated a failure of today's knowledge, of today's activity. If we try to think out of the future about today, we ignore the bias to today. And this is something which is very important for keeping curiosity also ongoing, and secondly, being a little bit unbiased and having a wish where we want to have been. And this is something what I think we all should ask ourselves, especially the future generation, because responsibility is not reciprocal. We have a responsibility for the future and not the future for today.
I don't know how I can follow this, but ultimately, I just going to speak as a girl who grew also in the South. So I would say, amazing what you're doing, and ultimately, education is key for us. Is the way to kind of move forward. So what you're doing is amazing, and either being invested in ocean, in economy, or being a doctor, etc. Anything that kind of help you open your mind and see other things and feel responsible. And we're lucky to have a generation that feels more responsible for our planet than we did or our parents did. So very proud of you, and yeah, keep it up.
So thank you very much, really, all of you, for your really extreme interesting discussions and contributions. I think because the time is short, so we cannot get into more details. We certainly have more questions than we started, but thank you very much. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, I think we just have to close. Okay, thank you, and thank you for the audience for participating. Okay, thank you.